You see that three-pointed star everywhere. It's a global symbol for luxury, for engineering, for being expensive. But the story of how Mercedes-Benz got here? Oh, it is a wild, wild ride. We're talking about genius, total failure, and some genuinely shocking turns you might not see coming. I mean, just to give you some perspective on their scale today, look at that number. The brand is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 billion. It's an absolute giant. But to really get it, we have to rewind the clock, all the way back to a time when its founder was just a broke engineer with a crazy idea. And trust me, this is not your simple, straightforward success story. Nope. Think of it in three parts. We've got the dream of a humble genius, then the arrival of a determined partner who literally saved everything, and finally, a really dark chapter that the company had to claw its way back from to become what it is today. So let's start right at the beginning. Chapter 1. It all starts with one man who had this vision of a world where horses weren't pulling our carriages anymore. His name was Carl Benz. Carl Benz was born in 1844, and his family didn't have much. His dad was a locomotive driver who died when Carl was just 2 years old, so his mom worked tirelessly to make sure he could get a good education, and boy, did it pay off. The kid was a natural genius, especially with mechanics. At university, one of his professors started talking about a future that went beyond the steam engine, and for Benz, a light bulb went off. And this is so important to understand. The whole idea of a horseless carriage, to most people, it was a joke. They thought he was nuts, but Benz, he was completely 100% convinced it could be done. All he needed was a little time and, a lot of money. His first shot at starting a business was a total train wreck. He partnered up with a guy who turned out to be completely unreliable. Things got so bad, the workshop's tools were actually confiscated. The dream was basically dead on arrival. But then, his fiancée, Bertha Ringer, stepped in. Seeing all of Carl's hard work about to go down the drain, she did something truly incredible. She took her own wedding dowry and used it to buy out the useless partner. Just like that, she saved the whole operation. And with Bertha keeping things stable, Carl could finally build his masterpiece. In 1885, he unveiled this, the Benz patent motor wagon. Now, this wasn't just some cart with an engine strapped to it. No, what made this so revolutionary is that Benz designed the entire vehicle around the motor. It was a little three-wheel tricycle with a one-cylinder engine that could chug along at about 7 miles per hour. This, right here, was the world's first real automobile. So what did the world think? Well, pretty much nothing. People were actually scared of it. They thought it might just blow up. Some folks called it the devil's carriage. Even his own business partners were like, Carl, why would anyone buy this? It's no faster than a horse. The vision just wasn't selling.
So, who comes to the rescue again? Bertha, of course. One morning in 1888, she just decides enough is enough. Without telling Carl, she grabs their 2 sons, gets in the car, and sets off on a 66-mile journey to her mother's house. I mean, no car had ever gone that far. It was a real adventure. She had to stop at a pharmacy to buy cleaning fluid to use as fuel, and even used her garter to fix the ignition. But after 12 grueling hours, she made it. And that trip, it created a media frenzy. It was the greatest PR stunt of all time, and it finally got the world to see the potential.
Okay, so Bertha's road trip basically kick-started the whole industry. By the late 1890s, Benz's company was the biggest car manufacturer on the planet. But as you can imagine, they weren't going to be alone for long. Success brings competition, which brings us to our second act, a story of rivals, high-speed racing, and a merger nobody saw coming. See, not too far away, another company was bubbling up. Daimler Motor and Gesellschaft, or DMG. This was run by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach. And they were different. If Benz was the careful, methodical engineer focused on reliability, Daimler was the aggressive businessman with all the right connections. And DMG's cars? They were starting to look a lot more exciting to people, and they were catching up fast. And here's a great little piece of trivia for you. The name that would become synonymous with luxury, Mercedes, had nothing to do with Daimler or Maybach. It actually came from a wealthy customer, a businessman named Emil Jelinek. He was obsessed with racing and ordered a super powerful new car from Daimler, but he had one condition. They had to name it after his daughter, Mercedes. The car was a huge hit, and pretty soon, DMG was calling all of its cars Mercedes. This whole thing dragged the auto industry into a brand new world, racing. Now, Carl Benz, he hated it. He thought racing was reckless, loud, and dangerous. But the Mercedes cars were winning everything. and getting all the headlines. So eventually, Benz had no choice. His company had to get in the game, and they built absolute monsters like the Blitz-Benz. In 1911, that thing hit 140 miles per hour and broke the world speed record. Racing, as it turned out, was the key to their survival.
But this golden age of rivalry came to a screeching halt. World War I completely devastated the German economy. With inflation out of control, both companies were on the brink of collapse. So they did the one thing no one ever thought they would. In 1924, they signed an agreement to cooperate. But the economy just kept getting worse, and by 1926, they were forced into a full-blown merger, creating the one single company, Daimler-Benz. This new company was an absolute powerhouse. You had Benz's engineering and Daimler's business savvy all under one roof. But this is where the story enters its most difficult and most controversial chapter. Because the rise of Daimler-Benz was happening at the exact same time as another, much darker rise in Germany. So, how did this icon of German engineering handle the rise of the Nazi Party?
Well, the regime saw the company as the perfect propaganda tool. Hitler poured massive government subsidies into Daimler-Benz so their race cars, the Silver Arrows, would dominate the international Grand Prix circuit. It was all about showing off German technological superiority to the world. Their luxury cars even became the vehicle of choice for high-ranking Nazi officials. And when World War II began, the company's transformation was complete. By 1942, they stopped making civilian cars altogether. The factories were totally retooled to pump out trucks, tanks, and aircraft engines for the German war machine. And to keep those factories running around the clock, the company did something horrific. By 1944, just look at this chart, nearly half of the entire Daimler-Benz workforce was made up of forced laborers. We're talking about prisoners of war, civilians abducted from occupied countries, and even people from concentration camps, all forced to work in absolutely brutal conditions.
So when the war finally ended in 1945, the company was in complete and utter ruin. The factories were just bombed-out shells of what they once were, and all of their foreign properties and assets were seized by the Allies. They had absolutely nothing. They had to start again from scratch.
But what happened next was, frankly, astonishing. It was an unbelievably fast comeback. After getting permission from the American authorities in 1946, they slowly got back to work. First, they built a few delivery vans. Then, in 1947, they managed to produce just over 1,000 passenger cars. But by 1954, less than 10 years after being totally destroyed, the company was already making over $1 billion in profit.
And from those ashes, Daimler-Benz began the long, methodical process of rebuilding its image, moving away from its wartime past and carefully crafting the identity we all recognize today, that global symbol of performance, safety, and luxury. And that brings us to the end. It's an incredible story, right? A story of innovation and sheer will. But it's also a story with a deeply, deeply complicated past. It kind of leaves you with a big question. How does knowing all of this history, the good, the bad, and the very ugly, change what that three-pointed star means to you today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.